Okay. Buenas and half a day, and thank you all for being here. The Committee on Education, Self-Determination, and Historic Preservation Infrastructure, Border Safety, Federal and Foreign Affairs, and Maritime Transportation will now convene for this oversight hearing. Today is Wednesday, December 15th, and it is currently 10:08 in the morning. For the record and in accordance with the open government law, public notices were sent out via email to all senators, stakeholders, and the Guam Daily Post on Tuesday, December 7th, 2021. And the second notice on Monday, December 13th, 2021. Notice of today's hearing was also available on the Guam Legislature's website. We have no senators present at this time. All must abide by the rules of conduct and quality assurance standards. Please keep your video on at all times and ensure you are in room with little interruptions and adequate lighting, specifically to make sure that participants' face is visible at all times. Virtual backgrounds should not be utilized during public hearings, which is authorized under resolution number 232-35 COR. The host of this hearing will mute participants until called upon by the chair. When called to speak, please ensure that you are unmuted and that you are speaking into your microphone. Members wishing to speak may indicate via the in-app feature chat box. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chair before speaking and shall state their name for record-keeping purposes. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any individual testifying or any senator is not permitted. Individuals speaking shall only use respectful and professional language and conduct. The chairperson of the committee may order the removal from a hearing of a committee or subcommittee of any person who is not a member of Ila Satorn Guahan and who fails to observe proper decorum pursuant to the 36 Guam Legislature standing rules. Any violations of the general rule of conduct will result in removal from the hearing by the host. Okay, so this morning we've called this oversight hearing to provide an update to the community on the Guam Department of Education and their budget, and to discuss what decisions have been made regarding the spending of the federal funds that have been received by the department. I would now like to invite or acknowledge the presence of our superintendent, Mr. John Fernandez, who is the executive officer of GDOE, Mr. Ike Santos, Mr. Joe Sanchez, Mr. Frank Cooper-Nurse, Ms. Tiara Cunningham, and Jesse. Jesse, what is your role for the record and your last name?
Jesse Espinal, Budget Office, GDOE.
Say that again.
Jesse Espinal for the Budget Office, GDOE.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Frank Cooper-Nurse, are you the acting Chief Financial Officer for GDOE?
I am the Acting Deputy of Finance and Administrative Services.
Okay, very good. Okay, Mr. Superintendent, did you prepare a statement or would you like us just to go right into the questions? We did not receive anything from your office.
I did not prepare testimony, but I did submit some documents if you'd like me to go over them, including both I think what we wanted to update the committee on is basically discussions that occurred after the legislature approved the budget. The board went into its process to approve a spending plan. Out of that spending plan came some discussions about the funds to support personnel and operations, and we were needing to solve some financial issues on the operational side. So what the board asked me to do was come up with a plan to provide back to them. And so I sent you the resolution as well as the memo that outlines that plan, and I'm happy to go over it here for you or for the general public, or to take questions directly as you choose.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we're holding this oversight hearing to understand how the ARP funds will be met, and okay. We did receive that document, and also to understand the current financial situation that GDOE is in, in reference to the request for supplemental funding, where you've mentioned in prior year obligations $1 million for BRIP, prior obligations $3.1 million for merit bonuses, educator wage study, which is $100,000, nurse pay increases, which is 878,498. FY 20 and 21 cash shortfall, loss of revenue, and need for GDOE maintenance of effort. Can you please just give us a detail on the contracts that you have dedicated for the ARP spending plan?
Okay,
And have they been in RFQ? What is the current process and state that these contracts are in?
okay, let me go ahead and so with me today, as you introduced for me, again, Frank Cooper is our Deputy for Finance. We can definitely address some of the budgetary questions. But with regard to the ARP, I have Mr. Ike Santos, who is our Federal Programs Administrator, and also Deputy Joe Sanchez, who is pretty much the project manager for most of these funds. So I'll go ahead and ask Mr. Santos if he could give an update on the status of the ARP fund specifically, and then we can answer questions again about the status, underneath the detailed updates with regard to how it's being spent and the contracts that are emerging from that stream of funding.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mr. Ike Santos.
Yes, your question?
Just wants an update on the.
I think the question was an update on the status of the ARP and the progress in deploying those funds.
With regards to the ARP, please make note that the ARP funds were made available to all institutions, inclusive of the public schools, the private non-public, which includes the 13 Catholic schools, the 3 charter schools, and all the private schools that have opted to participate in the specific federal grants. We gave everyone the green light immediately to start entering requisitions so that they can start that process, the procurement process. We know that it's lengthy, and so that's what's ongoing right now. The total amount was 200-some million. Of the 200-some million that has been allocated, I'm just pulling out my file because it's a pretty thick file as to the expenditures of the ARP. And so
Okay.
of the ARP funding, excuse me, it's a pretty thick binder.
So you, Mr. Santos, you stated that this is going to all public institutions, which includes our
private, non-public, and charter school institutions that have opted to participate and were entitled to receive these federal dollars.
Okay.
Based on allocation.
Okay, can you give us the amounts and allocation for each institution?
Can I? It's on the website, and on the website it's based on the allocation. The allocation by school, by institutions. It's the breakdown by institutions. No, those are expenditures that were done right now. Oh, that's the main. Where's the ARP application? It's on the website that we can be able to tap that, be able to provide that to you.
The ARP amount is $283 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe it 2.5% is used specifically to support the grants office as well as the ancillary offices with regards to the administration of those federal grants. But the breakdown is very, very specific, and that was transmitted to the U.S. Department of Education on the amounts based on allocation. The allocation were based on student enrollment from the previous school year.
Mm-hmm.
So we took the student enrollment from the previous school year and we divided amongst all, and that was the per pupil allocation based on each institution's allocation. And so what we can do is we can email you the breakdown by institutions.
How much is GDOE receiving for the consolidated grant?
That GDOE is receiving the largest of the amount, and that's the total amount. It's broken down by the ARP. The public schools are receiving $239,439,000 $427,921. St. John's is receiving about 1.5 million. Guahan Charter School is about 4 million. Office of Catholic Education, 25.5 million. St. Paul's is about 900,000. CIFA is about 1.9 million. State administration is 8.6 million. iLearn is 4.9 million. And we can give you the breakdown very specific because it's based on specific object categories that they were allowed: supplies, materials, equipment, labor, etc. And so it's very, very detailed.
What is the state administration? What is that?
It's basically the administration of these federal grants. The federal grants that we're dealing with is normally, pardon?
Where does this $8.6 million go?
It's all inclusive of the support for the ancillary personnel, our grants office, everything that needs to be done to administer the $287 million worth of federal grants.
Okay, and this is within GDOE?
Yes, it's within the Guam Department of Education.
And how are you utilizing these funds?
It's all broken down by different object categories. There's salaries of 4.3, contractual 1.8, printing services, advertisements such as IFBs, RFPs, and etc. is 20,000. General maintenance, fleet vehicles that we procured to deliver these items that were approved by the U.S. Department of Education, 121,000. Supplies and materials, 1.1 million, and office equipment for the state and ancillary, 1.2 million, total of 8.6 million.
Of all of these items that you've listed, other than the salary, have they been? Is the RFQ complete, and are the contracts currently executed?
There are many different areas with the different institutions. For example, the public schools. The public schools, their total amount is 239 million. Of the 239 million, 8 million is for salaries. 1.9 million is for benefits. Travel, which is basically on-island travel for fuel, is 75,000. Contractual is 147 million, and that's ongoing as we speak. There are some that are entered into requisitions, that some of them are in purchase orders, etc. And then you have supplies and materials, 37.5 million, and then equipment is about 44 million. So it's all dependent on each of the respective institutions when they enter into those requisitions. Like St. John's, 1.5 million. A lot of that has already been obligated, but it's still under requisitions.
Okay. My question is, out of the 8.6 million that is for the state administration under GDOE, have the RFQs or contracts, are they currently executed, or is there still money that has not been allocated?
The contract is only 1.8 million.
Okay, but you stated that.
And that's for disinfecting services.
Okay. So that has been completed. That contract is currently.
We have a new one that's ongoing.
Okay. And then for the $4.3 million in salary, where is that from? What are you using it for? What?
Ancillary personnel.
And what
the
is
support? Those are individuals that have opted to move here to support the warehouse personnel, procurement for these services, the delivery of these items to go to not just the public schools, the private, non-public, and charter schools. So all of that is encompassing, and it's still going phased in. So, and in most cases, we haven't even touched the the state admin, the 4.3 million in salaries, because we're still using a lot of our salaries for the state office is being used for both consolidated grant, ESF1, ESF2, and the ARP. So we're basically using these funds to support whatever we do outside the consolidated grant. But majority of those that are being funded under the ARP, ESF are usually full-time employees that we pulled in to support the ancillary support of these items for both public and private non-public schools.
Can you go down the list of the $4.3 million in salary, what the job positions are and the counts?
There's the only positions that are on the state admin are professional personnel, state officers, and project personnel, and that's about 1.6 million. And then the limited term full-time professional administrative and technical support is about 2.2 million or 2.7 to include fringe benefits. And they are to direct support to all state staff, project ancillary with day-to-day tasks and responsibilities aligned with the ARP OA SCA, including but not limited to professional, administrative, and procurement personnel to assist with relative grant activities. So these things are still ongoing. Some of them, very minimal has been expended because we've been using ESF1, ESF2 grant funds to support those services.
Okay, so if you're using ESF1 and ESF2, how much do you have remaining of the $4.3 million in salary?
We can get that to you, Senator. We don't have that offhand right now because the Munis system is currently down.
Okay, because right now I am tracking 2.8 from what you briefed.
Actually, it shouldn't
$2.8
even be that amount because it should be very minimal with regards to those services for the ARP because majority of the funds have been used for ESF1 and ESF2.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
remember this grant takes us all the way to 2024.
So out of $4.3 million for salary, you've only acquired.
Well, I can't give you the specific amount, but I can give you the later on when the Munis is up as to the actual expenditures.
Okay, please do.
Okay,
This is the $4.3 million of salary out of the $8.6 million of ARP funds that is used for state administration that is also within GDOE, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you have not utilized all of these funds.
Exactly, because this is supposed to stretch us all the way to 2024.
Okay.
Turn off.
But you have started executing the $4.3 million in salary, correct?
Some of them we have been able to access, such as those that we use to support procurement as buyers, administrative support, those in the warehouse to deliver all the items for PPEs, supplies, materials, etc. And then any of the items that we may use to include contractual personnel. We're working with the University of Guam to get engineering students to support our efforts because we do not have engineers within the department. So we're looking at contracting them to support the CIP process.
You're looking for engineers?
Because of the CIP, the ARP involves a lot of the CIP. Majority of the funds for the ARP involves the capital improvements and the repairs to prepare and respond to the COVID-19.
So you're going to use the $4.3 million in the salary from the ARP funds out of the $8.6 million of state administration for engineers?
No, there's a small portion that's been set aside specifically to support engineers. I believe it's like less than 100,000 to support this particular activity with students from the University of Guam that will be working part-time on a contractual basis to help support these type of activities. And it was approved by the U.S. Department of Education.
Okay, so that accounts for,
but we can give you all the details as to the specific amounts, but yeah, it's very clear in the application the purpose and the positions that we're looking at. And of that, 30% of the professional personnel, state officers and project personnel, 30% of their time will be spent on ARP. Okay,
and so what about the rest of the $230 million?
The 230 million is all dependent on, as it relates to the Guam Department of Education, 239 million. There's contractual of 147 million.
Have those contracts been executed?
Some of them have, some of them are still ongoing with regards to such as the canopy repairs. Some of them have actually
ongoing?
It's work in progress.
What does that mean, work in progress?
They're trying to develop or trying to finalize the scope of services, and we're working hand in hand with other outside sources so that we can be able to best equip the Department of Education with those services. We don't have professional services such as engineering firms, and I'm sure the superintendent will be able to give you more detail with regards to our efforts with the Guam Power Authority and their efforts to help support the public schools.
Okay, so the scope of services, meaning ongoing, which means that you haven't completed like a request for quote or a request for bid. You haven't completed any of those stages for the canopies?
Some of them are with.
Yeah, currently, Senator, for the capital improvements, these are district-wide.
I shouldn't be the one handling this.
Hold on, can you mute yourself? Sorry.
Oh.
So where it comes to the canopies, that's just one of many projects that we have to move forward. So what we've done, we've had canopies that have been completed under the DOI funds. DOI had given us $1 million a year, and so we've been able to do a few projects under that. But now we have the whole district to take into consideration for renovation and repair of existing canopies. The other thing that we're able to cover under the ARP funds is actually new construction of canopies. So DOI was only for renovation and repair of existing canopies. We're now adding on new canopies where schools indicate that they are needed. So I believe we've completed the assessment of all the schools as of last week for canopy needs, and then we've developed a draft scope of work that needs to be finalized for that, for all the work that the linear footage needed for the entire district, and we are looking to begin that procurement process once that scope of work is finalized. We don't have, I think what Ike mentioned is we don't have engineering services within the department, but we definitely need that type of support. So we do have an MOA with the Guam Power Authority. They were able to volunteer some assistance on the engineering side with their team. And so, we have been developing scopes of work, not just for.
I don't mean to cut you, Mr. Superintendent, but just so we don't go into the weeds of the build, because we can have another hearing for the CIP projects. But what is the amount of the scope?
Yeah, do we have that amount off the top with
or that you are dedicating to fix for the canopy out of the 147 million?
Let me go ahead and ask Ike if he can respond. We do have amounts set aside for each of these discipline areas. Ike?
Yeah,
or
the total amount for
CIP
for contractuals is about 147 million, but we broke that down by different areas of services. For example, contractual services that involve the management for medium CM work is about 4.5 million. For large CIP work or CM work is 7.5, and then small, I believe, is 2.5. And then we have consultant services for the assessments of buildings and classrooms, 500,000. Mechanical priorities such as capital improvement projects based on GDOE's facilities master plan, inclusive of report from the Department of Interior, Office of Insular Affairs, in partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers, $10 million that breaks it down just for the public schools. Another one deals with electrical priorities, 16.5 million. And then plumbing priorities such as bathroom repairs and overall, including water leaks throughout the 41 schools, is about 12.5 million. And then fire protection priorities, 9.5 million. Roofing priorities, 11 million. And then 12.5 million is hardware priorities that we placed in the application. 9 million for surface wall finishes as one of the priorities. Another one is the pest control priorities, 8.7 million. And then site drainage systems, vegetation septic priorities, 11 million. And then 10.6 million is play sports facilities. And then it goes down to very, very specific items such as procure data systems for students with disabilities, 216,000. Temperature control storage units, 1.2 million. And it just breaks it down into very, very specific areas with regards to contractual services.
And what has any of these, other than the ones that you've mentioned already, are any of those contractual services executed other than the ones that you mentioned? Meaning,
They're
do you have,
they're-
did you do a
they're
quote?
work in progress.
Okay, so
Yeah,
no,
so-
the answer is no.
The answer is no, Senator, because we actually have 3 pots of funding that we're trying to execute, and we're prioritizing the ones that expire first. So when it comes to the facilities, for instance,
Mhm.
both the air conditioning, which is contract, which we are working on, as well as immediate support for our schools to do facilities work in the near term.
Okay,
That's
so
coming out of the earlier funding, and then ARP is for the bigger projects
Yes,
that we are working to.
and that's what
begin
we're
to
talking
procure
about here.
from.
Thank you,
Correct.
Mr. Superintendent. So just to clarify that these dollar amounts that you're putting have not been dedicated dollar amounts. Is that correct?
They are dedicated based on what was approved by the U.S. Department of Education. They're
Okay.
reserved very specific for these specific priorities that were identified in the application and approved by the U.S. Department of Education.
Okay, but you don't know for certain that you're going to spend 8.7 million in pest control because the scope of work and the quote and the bid is not complete. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Those are estimates. These are all
These
estimates.
are estimates, okay. And what if in any state and time that these amounts do not cost as much as you estimate them to be? What will you do with the remaining money?
Then it's the prerogative of both the superintendent and Mr. Joe Sanchez, who serves as the project manager for the district, to determine where those movements of monies are going to be reallocated or reprogrammed based on the need. For example, if they don't need pest control of 8.5 million and all they need is 4 million, the remaining balances can be broken down into restroom repairs, playground facilities for the schools, or other priorities that the district deemed necessary.
That's great, and that's very good news to hear. So when do you expect all of these estimates to actually come to fruition? What is the timeline?
As you-
Can I
as
have
you-
Mr. Joe
as you
Sanchez or the
indicated-
superintendent respond?
Yeah.
Sure.
As you indicated, Senator, that we will get final, costs worked out when we actually enter into that contract. So right now, we're looking at finalizing scope of work, putting it out to bid. Obviously, vendors put in their quotes or proposals, and then when we finalize it, we'll get a better read on the numbers. And again, these are estimates, and they're going to be impacted by, again, the number of vendors who are able to compete for the services, because we're worried about that in terms of the competition that's out there for federal projects versus local projects. And then also the cost, whether it's a labor or supply cost, we know those costs have fluctuated. But once we encumber those funds through the contracting process, then we'll have a better more specific number. Our timeline for, again, these are numerous projects, but there are 3 major projects that we are trying to procure and begin the work, by the end of this school year. So, these are the canopy projects, restroom renovations, and
Thank you.
the air conditioning contract, and I believe there's some other work that needs to get done, but
You
there's
have
some.
so many contracts and you have
The
so
initial
many
projects.
estimates for the contracts, right? And so I just
Right.
want to, and I understand that, there's a process that takes place in procurement that determines, what vendors who are vying for these specific projects, et cetera.
Right.
But where is GDOE at in the execution phase of putting that out? So
Right,
that,
so right now, it's really the scope of work development
Mhm.
and finalization. So once the scopes are finalized, then we can go out for the solicitations.
And when do you
we're hoping to-
anticipate that, the scopes to be finalized?
So we are working, we do have drafts that we're working on with GPA to finalize. So hopefully by, over the next month, we can finalize that scope so that we can then initiate the procurement process. Our general timeline right now is for those items that are at that point where the scopes are being finalized, that we can do the procurements, and then hopefully that will be complete with the procurement in time to start the work in the summer when students are, not as fully on campus as they would be during the course of the school year.
Okay, so we look to see some tangible impacts from the estimates by the start of next school year.
Correct. So you should see some, so we're hoping that if we can get these scopes finalized and ready, when we bid them out, you'll see the publications, in the paper for we're required to publish these procurements so that vendors are aware, and then there will be a process and deadlines for submitting and then for reviewing. So by February, we hope to have that evidence of publication started so that you can see that these are the particular procurements underway.
Okay, so there is a possibility that your estimates of these contracts, the estimates may be less than the cost may be less than the estimates, or in some cases it may be more, right? Okay. Yeah. So we'll look forward to the evolution of these types of estimates in the upcoming months, in accordance with the timeline that you have presented for the anticipated contracts to be executed or the vendors to be awarded. Okay.
Correct. We can.
And that's good to know.
Yeah, Senator, we can, and I'm sure we can, because we want to keep the public informed as well. So I know that you're working off the ARP plan, and that's kind of general, right? It says canopies, but may not, get very specific beyond that. So we do. I think we can prepare more specific information, relative to the projects that are at least more specific, so that there are certain projects that are very school specific that are underway, and then at least something that we can provide that we can share with the community through this process. Okay,
thank you. So at this time, I'd like to acknowledge the Vice Chair, Senator Shelton, present, and Senator Sabina. Let's talk about your surpluses. In 2017, you had a surplus for $4,870,800. Why was there a surplus?
So say the amount again, and I know you have.
In your financial audit analysis, your fund balances at the end of the year was $4,870,800.
Let me ask Frank if you can. I know Frank is our deputy, but he also was, prior to the acting deputy, was our chief auditor. I wonder if you can pull that information up. And if he recalls.
Okay, Senator, you're referring back to an audit in 2017?
That's correct.
And you're referring, I'm trying to follow the details here, and you're referring to a surplus?
Yes. The fund balances at end of year. How about that? If you don't want to call it a surplus.
I have to get more information on that to be specific. Yes.
Well, then that would lead to my next question, right? We have the this memorandum stating that you need money to pay merit bonuses on top of the BRIT, which you are in the second month into the fiscal year, and already you're stating that first it was a $45 million shortfall, now it's $9 million, which means that you used ARP funds to supplement in some instances. So my question would be, if that the fund balance is at end of year 2017, which was $4,870,800, why did you not use that to pay your teacher merit bonuses?
Yeah, we'd have to go back and take a look at that. That's a fiscal year surplus, and I'm not, I would have to go back and.
And it also would have been able to pay off your prior year BRIP obligations. Okay.
It really depends on, I mean, that's just for that fiscal year, and I don't recall the details, but Frank, do you have any recollection now?
Senator, real quickly, I believe you're referring to an AS400, which I'm going to have to identify and go back. Yeah, because when I look at the financial audit, which is posted publicly,
AS400.
On the financial audit, which is our auditors, checking our financial data and going through this process, we're reporting a $12.6 million deficit, not a surplus. So if I see
in your AS400, we are tracking the fund balances at the end of the year. And this is what the legislature does, right? We look at the AS 400, look at all your encumbrances and expenditures, et cetera. And at the fund balance at the end of the year for 2017, you have $4,870,800.
The only thing that comes to my recollection, and I got to go back into time again, was two things: was the reservation that was imposed on the department, and then also the tax cut. But I have to make that alignment with the year because I believe that's prior to the tax cuts that we implemented.
That's correct. It's
Well,
prior to the
So
tax.
I have to see if there was any reserve clause on our local funding. But as far as the audit is showing, that is not aligned to our audit, and our audit is showing a deficit balance for that year.
Okay, but your AS 400, which states everything that you're doing, it states at the end of your year balance was 4.8 million, 4.8 million, roughly, almost 4.9. So in 2019, there was also a fund balance at the end of the year, which was $2,232,052.
Yeah,
Can you
see,
just check on that also?
I don't have access to the S400 right now, but again, if the cash, the way the process works, and you're very familiar with this, is through the release process. If the cash was made available to us, I'm more than certain
The
that
cash
we
was
wouldn't
available to you.
with deficit balances. Cash available in the S400 and released to GDOE could be different, right? So
Okay. Sure. Okay. So I guess because we don't know exactly, let's talk about your vacancies. In FY 2021, you had how many vacancies? Mr. Superintendent, in FY 2021, how many vacancies did you have?
I don't recall at what point in time you're referring to.
In fiscal year 2021, how many vacancies did you have?
I mean, at any one point in time, there would be a different number, I guess. Are you referring to something in particular?
So you had 115 vacancies at the beginning of FY 2021.
Right.
Okay, so and then you had a job fair to hire how many positions?
Are you talking about FY? Are you talking about this current fiscal year?
I'm sorry, yes, FY 2022.
Okay, yes. So the positions that we hired for were teacher assistants, community program aides, one-to-one school aides, and then also substitutes. So other than substitutes, all of those are federally funded positions.
Okay.
So those have been, so those are covered again, like some of them are special education, covering the one-to-one aides. And the others are either consolidated grant or through one of the emergency COVID relief funds to support the return to school.
Okay. So how many people did you hire from the job fair?
I believe I believe of the total positions, we were able to pick up probably half that amount at the end of the job fair. So we still have, I think the effort was, again, the way the job fair worked is that the applicants came in, they basically went and searched for the schools and that they wanted to apply. They were interviewed and either picked up or not recommended at those schools. So for those who were not recommended, so there were about 300, a little bit over 300 applicants. I believe about half of them got picked up, and then the remainder, HR was going out to try to see if they'd be interested in other openings at other schools that they didn't opt for in their first, in that first round.
Okay, and so how many people, what is your count for the position?
It's about half of the 300.
So 150 roughly?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have the specifics right in front of me. I had that number earlier.
Okay, can we get the specifics? So you picked up 150 positions. Did any of those fill your 115 vacancies?
They would have only filled the substitutes positions. The rest are federally funded positions, and they wouldn't be on our local vacancy count.
Okay, and this is federally funded through the consolidated grants?
Either consolidated grant or a portion is a consolidated grant and some through the COVID relief.
I'm sorry, I
funds.
didn't hear you. Can you say again?
Some, I believe, let me ask, but a portion would, my understanding is a portion would be through consolidated grant and a portion would be through the ESF funds.
Sir, if I may, this is Ike. What was approved in the ARP application by the U.S. Department of Education was full-time limited term, 100 teacher assistants to assist in classroom instruction, face-to-face online remote learning, and then 100 community program aides to assist in the outreach activities to the underserved communities. So 100, and they're all funded under the American Rescue Plan. They're full-time limited term positions.
Right, and thank you, Mr. Santos. And this is the challenge that what we're getting with GDOE is you're telling me how much is funded, but you're not telling me how much you hired and the amount that you hired. And so out of the 100 full-time limited term teacher assistants, how many did you hire? And is that under ESF? Is that under ARP? Or is this under consolidated grants? Or you're just going to figure it out as the year goes? Because once you draw down,
the
it turns
100
into
teacher
other money.
assistants, Senator, are from the ARP. The
Okay,
100 community program aides are with the ARP. They're full-time limited term positions.
okay.
They're with the ARP.
And how many did you hire?
That's still in the process with personnel. I believe in the recruitment process. There are several that I've signed off on to immediately begin, but it's still ongoing.
Okay. So several's like 3.
Well, if I could respond, I mean, these questions, if we had posed this to earlier, I would have been able to provide that in more immediately, but based on where we were about a week or so ago, there are about 304 who attended the job fair. Of those recommended and who've accepted positions, there are about 127 of those positions, and those would be 59 one-to-one aides.
Is that, and
20
that's the 59 one-to-one aides, is that from consolidated grant?
School A one-to-ones are from SPED. Community program aides 1 and 2, there are a total of 36 who were picked up. And I think I'm going to ask Ike to confirm where those community program aides, which funding, because there's 4 different pots of funding.
ARP, American Rescue Plan. They're full-time limited term.
And then the on-call subs are locally funded, and there were 32 that were picked up from the job fair. And so there are, again, remaining positions that HR is going out to contact those who weren't selected to see if they'd be interested in another school and another opening, and work through that process over these 2 weeks to try to fill those positions.
Okay. What is being used for the consolidated grant out of the positions that you mentioned?
So let me ask Ike or Joe, but the question is, what positions are being funded out of consolidated grant?
There are 280 teacher assistants that are currently funded under the consolidated grant, but those are separate positions because they're very specific as to the requirements of the consolidated grant. Remember, those positions can only supplement and not supplant. Unlike ARP, we're able to leverage whatever resources we have to support the schools. So we're adding more to it so that we can be able to ensure that students who return back face-to-face are provided the opportunity for learning.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. So just to clarify, you can utilize ARP to support the schools. Is that correct?
And that's what we've been doing, but it has to be what was submitted in the application to the U.S. Department of Education. It's very specific. The application is very specific, and they would ask for specific details as to what are you using to support on preventing, preparing, and responding to the impacts caused by COVID-19.
Okay. But the ARP utilization of funds is more flexible than the ESF.
Correct.
I see that you can use it for operations, and I see that you can use it for CIP projects.
Again, it's limited. It's limited because it must address specific requirements. The part of the funding must address interrupted instruction. It's to be used for strategies to meet students' social, emotional, and mental health and academic needs. It must be used for evidence-based summer, after school, and other extended learning and enrichment programs to include early childhood education and ensure all students have access to teachers, counselors, and school personnel for support at-risk students who have been severely impacted as a result of the pandemic situation. So there are very, very specific areas that we can and we can't do. So, but the supplement versus supplant does not apply to the ARP. But
Okay,
there's specific gray lines that you cannot cross over.
Okay, and so you're saying again that the supplement and the supplant does not apply to the ARP as it did for the ESF funds?
No, it as it relates to the consolidated grant. The consolidated grant, you cannot use you cannot supplement as supplant. You must supplement only.
Right, and then you said that the ARP, you can utilize it a little bit more with a little bit more flexibility.
So the ARP, I mean,
Correct.
just to,
Okay,
right, the ARP does not have a supplement, but supplant, nor does not have a supplement rule, but it does have an MOE. So that's kind of the difference in that funding.
And that's what we'll talk about in the next question. But after I ask these things, because now we're talking about your vacancies. And the reason why I'm asking you about your vacancies is because, again, we're challenged with how are we tracking all the money that GDOE is getting? And so just so that we better understand the utilization of the appropriations that GDOE is receiving on top of the additional consolidated grants, on top of the ESF 1, ESF 2, and on top of ARP. So in FY 2021, you had 372 vacancies, and the appropriation for those vacancies was $20,797,149. How many people did you hire in FY 2021 out of your beginning of your vacancies of 372?
I don't have that answer immediately available, but we can provide a response later.
And then we are tracking for FY 2020. FY 2022, we have 115 vacancies, and then we appropriated $6,550,846. And so if you could just give us a breakdown of, for the past several years from FY 19, FY 20, and FY 21, the list of your vacancies and the amount that you hired to include the expense or the salary and to include the benefits, we'd like to get a copy of that. Because it's
Sure.
not, it's what we're tracking is not adding up. And so if we're appropriating $20,797,149 for vacancies, but you only hired maybe like 50 or 100 out of that fiscal year, then we'd like to see where the remainder of that money went.
I think to paint a good picture of that, we're happy to do that. I think.
Okay.
So what happens if we don't mind, what happens?
Can we just move on to the definition? The definition of the maintenance.
May I answer the question about the vacancies?
Well, are you going to give me definitive numbers, or are you going to give me a generalization?
I'm going to give you an explanation of why all the vacancies can't be filled, and I think this is over several years. What is on your, and I think it's important that we reconcile the information on your end with our information, because if that's a source of misunderstanding, that definitely needs to be addressed. Typically, when we report on,
I think that we're accounting for that we appropriated $20 million for 372 employees. What I'm asking you is how many employees did you hire?
What I'm responding to you is that the money appropriated for personnel and the money appropriated for operations leaves us typically with an operational shortfall. And so in any given year, management has to manage that shortfall. And I think that came up in our recent discussion with the senator, when we met with Senator San Augustine, about what this number is that shows an offset in the personnel side that goes to operations. So I think I'll be happy to share with you that information on personnel but I believe that would probably be the most straightforward answer as to why all vacancies can't be filled. If we're going to continue to pay utilities and contracts and other obligations that we also have. So we're happy to.
I think that maybe the next fiscal year that we can get together and work closely on itemizing the lump sum budget. Because
So,
we can go back and forth and saying, oh, we did give you money for your utilities. That's what we included. We gave you money for your vacancies. We gave you money to hire more teachers. We gave you money, for an X amount of things. So I think what it is here is that perhaps next year, instead of identifying a lump sum budget, we might need to itemize these expenditures or the costs so that we can ensure that, hey, if you're saying that we didn't give you money for utilities, right here is saying that we did give you money for utilities. And I think that's the challenge we're having here.
yeah,
is that
I agree
we're
with you.
entrusting GDOE to operate and to meet the appropriation. But in essence, we're having challenges really tracking the money and how it's being spent. And okay.
If I could go on the record, I would say
appreciate
that I do agree with you, because it would actually take the pressure off of management to try to make all these numbers work. So,
and then we would have the numbers up front so that we don't come in after 2 months and saying, oh, we're not funding education.
No, but it might require a larger budget, I think, when all is said and done. So I think that's definitely what we need to go through, the operational costs and the personnel costs, so that they all kind of add up.
Sure. But I'm hoping that it won't, because you have $283 million to offset a lot of the things that you're having to deal with that you say that you needed for the past 5 years, right? And so
no, absolutely. But everything we throw into the operational needs comes out of a capital improvement project, the way it's laid out in the ARP. So we're hoping that we still have money left over. Yeah, we still have money left over for those important facility improvements.
And the maintenance of effort waiver, did you submit a maintenance of effort? We've been asking your office this several times for the past 2 years. We understand that there was a need for maintenance of effort. They kept on saying, oh, you need to wait because we're not allowed to submit till September. Well, 2 Septembers have gone and passed. And so has there ever been a writing request or a written request for the maintenance of effort?
So my understanding is that these are based, I mean, again, there's different bases for these maintenance of efforts. One being the level and the other being the proportion and it's changed over the different grants. So my understanding is that to date, there hasn't needed to be a maintenance of effort waiver as it pertains to the maintenance of effort for the prior grants, which have already been reported. So it means
why
that
is it in
the government has met the maintenance of effort.
Okay, so the memorandum says that you need $1.7 million for GDOE maintenance of effort FY20.
Correct. That's for the current. Yeah, is that for the current? Let me talk to Frank. Frank, is that for the current?
This is FY20.
Correct. So if I can,
let me have Frank go ahead and clarify that.
And Senator, if I could, just before I get into that, I think he asked an earlier question. He said for me to go ahead and look it up. Well, I did just pull those figures, and for the 2017. And you got to understand the income statement, the revenues versus expenditures led us to a 10.4 deficit, but there was a transfer in of 990,000 and a transfer in for capital leases, which aided our financial position. But the transfer in for capital leases, while it affects our books, it doesn't affect our cash. So again, at the end of the year, we're at an operational deficit in terms of our income statement, revenues over expenditures, and we're at a cash shortage. Yet the transfer in from the government and relative to the capital lease, that put us in a better financial position from a reporting standpoint. But to answer your question on the MOE requirement, so the MOE requirement, and it gets kind of technical because there's an ESF1, ESF2, and an ARP. So let's go with the ESF1. The ESF1 sets apart 2 separate MOE baselines. The first baseline is for elementary and secondary education. And the second baseline is for higher education, which is, again, similar to the first one, where it takes the average revenues provided as a 3-year base. So strictly for ESF1, we're looking at baseline years of 2017, 2018, and 2019. And one of the things that we considered when we're looking at the MOE requirement wasn't the appropriations, but was the cash received. So when you're looking at a 3-year average for cash received for that ESF1, in 2017, we're looking at 260 million, and I'm just rounding off here. In 2018, it was 207, and in 2019, it dropped to 200. Our average level of support would have made us to be roughly 207 point, I would say $207.9 million, or right around $207 million. So if we were to look at the average baseline, and what the baseline does is it sets apart a 3-year average to determine the MOE requirement for 20 and 21. So if we were to take the 3-year average of 207 and then look at what we were provided, we fell slightly short. So that's why you're seeing.
So why are we learning now that you need for GDOE for FY20 maintenance of effort? Why didn't we learn that last year? Why didn't we learn that when we were meeting with Office of Finance and Budget? Why was that not made clear?
So there are a couple of things, and Frank, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but number one is we do wait for the audited numbers. So we do have to wait for the audits on that year to close.
So FY21 March, right? We should be getting for FY20, right?
Right.
So
right.
why didn't we know that going into FY 2022?
I think the other clarification that we need is that when the maintenance of effort is being described by US Ed, as Frank mentioned, there is an overall maintenance of effort that needs to be met by the government. And that includes higher ed, charter schools, and DOE. And then there's a maintenance of effort that we're required to report just for DOE. So it could be the case, and I think this is what we have to get clarity on, that the government meets the maintenance of effort overall, but for our line item, we are slightly short, because maybe the resources were higher in someone. So that's something that we do have to clarify.
I think we need to clarify that item because we did discuss maintenance of effort for GDOE, not for the whole government. And so in FY20, if you're saying that we're going by audit numbers, and that's FY21 March, we should have known that going into FY 2022 that you did not meet the maintenance of effort. Well, the challenge and there. So we should have submitted some kind of thing to USDOE in FY21.
So again, the clarification for that is important because again, when it comes to overall MOE, when you talk to the governor's office, they believe that it's been met overall. But we need to determine whether the US Ed will look at DOE specifically and require a waiver. The second issue is that moving into 22 to this current year, the basis for the MOE is different now. It's now a percentage of overall expenditures.
I understand that, Mr. Superintendent.
Yeah,
but
that's
we're
why
talking about FY20. That's the. So if we need to get clarification, then before you put out a memorandum and mass produce it to the public saying, we have this maintenance of effort shortfall for FY20, and we don't have clarification on it, then we would appreciate if we get the clarification first to say, okay, and we would appreciate also if we've known this going into FY 2022, because there was no maintenance of effort waiver submitted. We received an email on another end saying that you met the maintenance of effort.
Yeah, so that is something that we are needing clarification on because
I look forward to working with you on that. I mean, I understand that GDOE has needs and we want to help you to get those needs and to meet the intent of your mission and your vision. Absolutely, we want to do that. So, but we just need to understand when we come up every budget year, we need to understand really exactly how this money is being spent and the concrete meaning of the items that are listed.
Correct.
So in the future, we're going to address this issue, okay? The $192 million infrastructure bill, have you written to the, or the $192 million that Guam will be receiving for the infrastructure, have you written to the governor looking to avail to any of that for GDOE schools and CIP projects?
Yeah, no, I think Mr. Santos has been in contact with US Ed because typically we would get communications directly.
Is GDOE authorized to receive any of that money?
Yeah, Mr. Santos, do you have any update?
What normally occurs is that once Congress approves approves the appropriation, or in this case, the infrastructure bill, it breaks it down. It goes into OMB, and OMB breaks it down to the different federal agencies. In the case of education, U.S. Department of Education, they will break that down by the 50 states and the territories. And within the territories, there's a percentage that is to be received. Things such as childcare, items such as safe drinking water, and other infrastructure. So it's all dependent on the U.S. Department of Education, and they're right now doing the calculations.
Okay.
They've done that for the 50 states. They're doing it for the territories, and once they get that, they will let us know immediately.
Okay, so we don't have a definitive answer just yet. Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I'll open it up to any of my colleagues who have any questions that they would like to ask GDOE. Senator Perez, do you have any questions at this time? Just to go ahead and unmute yourself, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, good morning to everyone here. Yeah, I would just like to follow up on my concern about the the PPEs in the classroom, specifically HEPA filters and functioning air conditioners. I think that's, one of the concerns for me is, this is a pandemic that's, or a virus that's transmitted through the air. And I just wanted to know what the status is on that. And, basically how many HEPA filters are you planning to procure? I mean, I hope it's one for every classroom, and that it's of sufficient capacity to clean out the air at, with the increased amount of students back in the classroom. I don't know if social distancing is still viable considering the constraints of the size of the room. And so it's really, it's a really concern for me. And, to know that there's that, that lack is there. So if there's any way you can expedite that, or yeah, if you can let me know what the status is on that, and how many do you plan to procure? Is it one for every classroom? Thank you.
The response is, and again, I'll turn to my team. If you need to clarify, go ahead. But we do intend to have a HEPA filter in every classroom. We're actually in the second attempt to solicit for the HEPA filters. And right now we are responding to a protest at the agency level and trying to resolve that. So hopefully it doesn't go further than the agency level, and we can proceed to put the solicitation out for bid, but or to receive the bids from interested vendors. But right now it's been protested twice, and we're trying to resolve that so we can move forward to get those HEPA filters in.
Okay, so I understand that you're working with GPA to put together a bunch of bids. Are they able to take a look at this as well, just to make sure it's in the best shape?
Yeah, there just seems to be it's just I think part of it is that we're working to get these things done as quickly as possible, and I think there may be concerns about being able to meet our timeliness needs, and so we're trying to resolve that with the vendors to make sure they understand that we're aware of all of those supply chain issues. But our target is, of course, to try to get these in as as reasonably soon as possible. But yeah, we'll go ahead and depending where we're at, if we can move forward, we'll move forward. But if we have time because of the protests are extended, GPA hasn't been involved in that because it went out earlier, but it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, have you thought of lifting the protests because of the safety of the teachers and the students?
We're trying to consider all options. Obviously, because of the federal funds, they prefer to see that you procure it out competitively and go through that process. But it is like the biggest. It is. I mean, even though it's not a requirement, it is the biggest priority from the standpoint of classroom safety, because we do know that it'll definitely make everybody feel better. It will, it'll absolutely take care of not just COVID-19 related issues, but other health related issues that we would love to see addressed, like asthma and allergies and other things that, we can see benefits from. So it is a priority, and we'll definitely do our best to expedite it and navigate so that we can avoid these protests that are still outstanding.
Okay, thank you. I guess maybe just a general question. So I know there's in the letter there was you stated that there's a 45 million shortfall, and there seems to be like a disparity. There's a lot of money coming in from the federal government, and yet we have this shortfall. So I'm sorry, I came in late. Maybe you would explain that thoroughly, but if you can just maybe from my own or the clarification on how that is possible, considering so much money is coming through.
No, absolutely. I didn't get a chance to explain, but in the memo, it is laid out there. I think we filed our application for the American Rescue Plan earlier, prior to the budget being finalized and approved. So what we did there were two moving parts. One was our budget request to the legislature, which came in, again at the 370 million level, and we brought it down to about 290 based on an initial review of our draft ARP plan, right? And that's where we took out all the capital improvement requests and so forth. So we brought our local budget request down to about 290. And then of course, the legislature went and passed the budget, and we also got final approval of our ARP plan. So when we went to the board to approve a spending plan, the board wanted to make sure that based on that snapshot in time for all warm bodies in the department, that we allocated and ensured there was funding reflected on the personnel side. So to fund all warm bodies in the department at that time, it costs about $187 million. So that covers, that makes sure that all your people who are in positions now are funded for the year. That leaves, with a $206 million appropriation, that basically leaves about 20 million left to fund the rest of the operations. And so, utilities itself already takes up the majority of that. And so you're left trying to fund utilities, and then some of your other key contracts, food contracts, custodial contracts, and so forth. So what the board did in its resolution was, let's make sure we reflect full funding of our personnel. Let's try to find a way to address the operational needs, which was estimated at $45 million based on current services that are being provided. In order to achieve that $45 million, to close that $45 million gap, there of course are ways in which we would look to see if we can further reduce, our costs to close that gap, or to seek additional revenue support or supplemental funding from other places. So what we did is we went with the final ARP and the final budget to go through whether or not there was further things that we could cover under ARP that we could justify. And we did find an amount there that we could use from ARP. The rest has to be managed either by reducing costs internally or seeking additional funding elsewhere. And again, we thought that also with the governor's funding that, these things that might not be approved under US Ed, could possibly be covered, by other sources. So that's what the plan lays out. And what we mean by 45 million shortfall doesn't mean that we can't find federal resources. We did go through that to narrow that, that gap. Those resources won't always be available, which will leave us with a problem that we have to solve next year. But for now, we were glad to report back that upon that further review, we've been able to, take a lot of school-based, requests and ensure that they were already covered, in our ARP grant. So that helped us close the gap. So we're still working. We have about $9 million that we're trying to close, and we'll continue to work. We're going through a process of cross-leveling, our employees based on our reduced enrollment to see if we can generate savings for the rest of the year. We've held off hiring, in this first quarter, as to try to make up that difference. So we'll continue to try to find those cost savings. And then again, we were lucky to have to be able to get those federal funds shifted over to address those local needs.
Thanks. And as far as the canopies, I guess you have one for every school. Is that for just sheltering after busing, or what's the
It's throughout the schools. There are a lot of canopies that exist that are in disrepair that we are trying to, replace and repair. Well, actually replace, hopefully, and with something that'll be longstanding. That's to provide for that additional physical distancing outside and additional shelter as needed. And again, what I mentioned earlier, you might have missed this. DOI funds would only fund renovations and repair. They wouldn't fund new construction. And so some of our schools have been requesting new walkways and sheltered walkways in other parts of campus. So in this round, as we go out to bid, we wanted to go to the schools and do that assessment and make sure we included any requests for new, walkways that would not have been eligible under DOI's funding. So again, we're prepared to move forward. I mean, we've done an assessment. We have a good template because we've been able to do some canopy repairs with the DOI funds. It was only $1 million a year, but we have some recent, solicitations that have already been through the process. So we want to take that template and kind of move quickly to finalize the scope of services so that we can begin the process of bidding that out to vendors or getting that out to vendors to bid.
Thank you. And then just one last question. So the turnaround time for fixing air conditions, is there, I'm hearing some issues with that there's a delay or barriers to getting classroom air conditions fixed properly.
Yeah, we're working on that, and I mean that's always been a challenge. I mean, if we look back to last year, we had about $1.6 million allocated to air conditioning, repairs and replacements, and that money ran out on us in about March. So we had to, typically we would have to wait till the next, fiscal year. But what we were able to do was, because of the availability of federal funds, we were able to push those federal funds into the last year of that contract so that we could then work over the summer to recommence the replacements and repairs. So Frank and I met with the vendors. We've got a schedule. We've got a better inventory of all those units. But the key piece for us is getting the next solicitation out for the new AC contract. So this new AC contract will not only build in improvements that are, now that we're in a COVID-19 environment, there are some changes to the specs to make sure those units are, equipped for this, new environment. So such as, with UV lights and other types of protective coatings to increase the life of those units. And then what we're really looking forward to is we have about, I would say maybe about 12 million set aside for air conditioning. So if we're talking about 1.6, usually on an annual basis, the funding that's available now is way in excess of that. So once we get that new contract up, we should be able to not have the same issues that we have now, which is any delays, between repair and replacement. Some of the delays that I will say on the repair side are having to do with some of the supply chain situation that we have. So we've worked with the vendor. They've typically given us a 2 to 3 week turnaround if there's need for parts to be shipped in, but we're already hearing about some of these things taking months, 2 or 3 months instead of 2 or 3 weeks because of the shipping issues that have been encountered these past few months. So Frank and I Frank's on top of it. We're looking at the next contract as really being the opportunity to free up some of these funds, increase the amount of funding that will then enable us to accelerate the replacement and repair of those units. So I think we're looking at trying to get that out and hopefully have a contract in place sometime in the next semester. It's really important that we try to get that done, and we're looking at, possibly, hopefully, March, April to have that new contract in place. And then once we get to the summer, we, be able to fully address anything that's kind of major and outstanding.
Yeah, I do hope the specs include energy efficiency, because you can really reduce your power bill probably in half or significantly.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Well, just having the inverter, the inverter units. Some of these things that we're replacing are really very obsolete units that just because they don't sell those units anymore, everything that they're selling, especially these inverter units definitely have a big impact on energy savings, because some of these are really outdated units that are being replaced.
Okay, so that's included in the specs then.
Yes, we're happy to share those specs with you. I think we're close to final on that as well.
Okay, great. And I do hope that you get the air purifiers, by, this coming quarter. I mean, if anything you could do to expedite that, I think that's really critical.
Thank you. Yeah,
Especially-
we'll do our best on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam.
Thank
Chair.
you. Thank you, Senator Paris. Senator Shelton? At this time, I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Senator Teletabi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Superintendent, and all of the team there for the information that you're providing this morning. In the same line of questioning as Senator Perez about the air conditioners, I was hearing some concerns from teachers in schools who have not received air filters yet. And so their solution in their classrooms is that they're opening the windows while keeping their air conditions running. And now this is causing condensation and maybe some kind of mold issues. Is this something that you're hearing about, and how are you addressing it?
I haven't heard that one in particular. I do know, I mean, again, we are investing in HEPA filters. And I think, as I mentioned before, this has been round 2 and we hit another protest. This apparently is a very competitive area. So, I mean, and you know what I mean? There are certain solicitations that go out and then you realize these are ones that are very, very competitive. And so we're hopeful to get through this process. And again, as Senator Sabina said, Senator Perez said, if there's any way, because of the emergency needs in this COVID environment, to get it expedited, we definitely will look at all ways to do that. But we're at the point of trying to hopefully resolve an agency level protest so that we can move it forward. But if that, if that doesn't succeed, we'll definitely, try to find other ways to make sure that this can move forward. On the air conditioning side, again, we want to make sure all air conditioning units are working. The guidance on COVID-19 really is, has to do with circulation of air, and they do recommend opening doors and windows. And so we do know that that is a challenge in a lot of our schools, because when you run the air conditioner, you don't also want to run it with it blowing out into the, outside the classroom. But I haven't heard that particular, issue, but I definitely will see if we can, note that for our facilities folks.
Okay.
But definitely need to bring it up to the administrator. I'm glad to hear the air conditioning unit is working, which is usually the biggest issue. But on the condensation side, that really does vary from school to school. So I'll have to sit down and talk to Frank and facilities. Because there are requests where some schools to remove, sometimes they have plexiglass up on the windows and other things that prevent certain, circulation, of the air. And then we'll have to take a look if we've gotten those kinds of requests from the schools.
Okay, well, I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I don't want this solution of opening the windows and the doors to cause another issue for teachers and students, and make a different kind of dangerous situation. So if we can prevent that, and of course expedite the processing for the filters and for the new air conditioning, I think that's what we all want to see in the best interest of the department. So I thank you for that. And then of course I still hear from teachers who are worried about receiving their sneeze guards, which they've been told for months and months that this is something that they can expect, but still haven't. I don't know if you can just speak to that a little. I'm not sure if I missed it earlier. I was popping in and out.
No, you didn't miss it. We didn't address that, but
Okay.
I think the issue is there are sneeze guards. So sneeze guards should be provided to each teacher. The sneeze guards are not being put up in classrooms for every desk unless there are students who have challenges, wearing masks and so forth. So those are on a case-by-case basis. And then where the plexiglass is being used is in the cafeterias as a recommendation from public health. So when we walk through with public health, the only area where they suggested maybe you want to consider that for the cafeterias is because that's where the masks are coming off. But in the other areas, it wasn't the recommendation or requirement. So there may be, there may be teachers saying, we're expecting to have sneeze guards on every desk, but that isn't in the plan at this point. It really is around the teachers' desks as well as the cafeterias.
I see. So perhaps that was a miscommunication or a misunderstanding on my part. When I was talking with some teachers, it seemed like they were expecting sneeze guards between each student within the classroom, but I understand now for those only who have troubles with their mask. And so can you confirm that all of the sneeze guards have been placed in all cafeterias?
I can get you that confirmation. It was, yeah, I mean, they were supposed to complete by the end of November, and that's my understanding. So I can just double check to make sure there's no further schools needing cafeteria plexiglass. Some of the schools, that what they do is can you come back next week instead and do it at a better time? But I haven't heard any delays. They were all going on track and on schedule when they started the installations.
Okay, and hopefully if there was any delay, they can complete it all within this within the holiday break.
Sure, I'll double check with staff, but I'm pretty confident they're all completed, but we'll double check to make sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the team again, and Merry Christmas to all of you.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. Senator
Thank you, Madam
Tybee,
Chair.
thank you. Do you have any questions or any questions? We're gonna state this to questions, okay?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. We're just.
Do you have any questions for the panel? That's what I'm saying.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't
Thank
catch
you.
that last part there. Okay, yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to ask questions and make some comments too with regards to them if needed. Anyways, thank you, Superintendent, and to all those who are here to support you, and appreciate the time that you spent to talk to us about this. With regards to the management, the third-party fiduciary management, and them overseeing the federal funds, how is that going right now? Or what's the status on that?
So we actually had a conversation this morning about 7 a.m. Congressman San Nicolas actually facilitated a meeting with the senior advisor to Secretary Cardona at USDOE, as well as other key representatives in the various programs that affect our third-party status. So what we've been pushing for is for a site visit from the team, because during this pandemic, we've been limited to virtual monitoring, and there are a number of items that we believe we've completed, but they will not remove from our reconsideration plan until such time as they've done an on-site visit. So every time they say we don't know because we're not budgeted or we're not allowed to come out yet, that just means we're further delayed in terms of any decision for the third party to be removed. So that's definitely, we did get a commitment to a virtual monitoring in January, and then a spring visit, the date to be determined, but the spring visit from USDOE to come out here. Now, I think everybody who was in that meeting agreed that we had made the progress. We were pretty much able to demonstrate that progress, and that we should be thinking more about what it's going to take to sustain that progress without the third party. So we're basically pushing that, come and give us the on-site visit. We think we're almost there, if not there already. But if there are things that we need to improve, why don't we just work directly with USDOE and receive direct technical assistance from the department, versus requiring a third-party fiduciary that we have to pay $2 to $3 million a year, which really their job isn't to help us with these improvements. Their job is really to watch over the funding for US Ed. So we do think that they're listening, and that they are nodding their heads that this is something that we should be looking at. Do we really need a third party to make these final improvements, or can we just take those resources and invest them back to build and sustain those improvements? So I think we're hopeful that we'll get that favorable visit in the spring. Sorry, ma'am, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. You think all these time that we're doing Zoom, you would remember to hit that mute, but
always happens.
I know, right? It happens. So does this funding that's coming in through the CARES and the ART funding that you're receiving, do they oversee this as well, the third party fiduciary management? They oversee it too?
Yes, technically, anything
Everything,
coming from
everything.
USDOE, yes. So it did get wrapped in, but the point we're making is, everybody's getting these funds. Everybody's got, 10 times the amount of work and the amount of supplies and equipment and other things that need to be done. But please don't use it to add more items to our list or to delay consideration, because things are always going to change and this shouldn't be counted against us.
Yeah.
So, but it is technically under their oversight, yes.
Okay, and how many times during the year do you provide reports, or do they provide reports on the spending of these funds?
Well,
Like-
we're required to provide a regular accounting of all of our grant spending on a quarterly basis.
Quarterly?
And that's up on our website, on the federal program's website.
What about to the third-party fiduciary? I mean, is that done on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis instead of quarterly?
Well, we're always actively working with them, but the reporting that we do is to USDOE, right? I mean, I think for the most part, they've been focusing in on, at least for the past, year, focusing in on handing off the fixed assets management to us. So this year we completed the annual inventory on our own and submitted a report, to USDOE, and we're hoping that will lead us to removing the third-party oversight. And we know we're moving forward. We're working with them closely to facilitate the reimbursement of federal funds. I mean, one of the challenges for our budget, for our cash flow, is the fact that we actually have to front the money here to pay for federally funded employees and then get reimbursed. So, past challenges in getting reimbursed timely has added to what we're already talking about in terms of cash crunch. But right now, we've worked out a process where we are keeping that lag, to less than a pay period's worth of outstanding, costs. So that's been improved. But ultimately, if the third party were not in place, we should be able to directly draw those funds for personnel and not have to operate on a reimbursement process. So that's what we're requesting from USAID and hoping to get to. It's just been more complicated with the third parties, current requirements.
Okay, thank you for that. And I don't want to belabor this. I did come in late and I apologize. There were some obligations I had to attend. But was there a discussion on the vacancies? If there was, then just let me know, because I'll review the tape anyways and go over what I missed.
We'll be
Senator.
responding. Yeah.
Yes, Senator, there was a discussion on vacancies, and so we just asked for a list of the vacancies that they've hired under ARP.
Okay.
Or the vacancy or the additional personnel on top of their vacancies for ARP and whatever consolidated grants, funding, the federal grants, and then also with the appropriation.
And just an update, any CARES Act money as well too, because CARES Act money is still in circulation right now. So that would be very helpful to Madam Chair, as well as any information you can provide. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you so much. I'll just review the tape on discussions on that. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. And
Thank you, Senator.
Yes, everyone. Be
Thank
safe.
you. Merry Christmas.
Okay, are you utilizing any of the ARP funding, Mr. Superintendent, to become more energy efficient, energy saving, as far as utilities costs?
I think that's definitely a matter of discussion with the board as we've been talking about our facilities. So, definitely with the air conditioning, yes. With the canopies, and I'm not sure that's really been a part of our discussions. With the restrooms, as we do renovations, we're looking at definitely the water utilization and making sure we address, not just change fixtures, but address any issues with leaks and other things that may be resulting in loss of water. But we have further discussions. We're meeting regularly on this matter. So I know that Dr. Okada is very forward thinking and looking at ways we might advance energy efficiency through these facility funds.
Okay, great, thank you, because we have this other animal with GPA that's saying, oh, if GDOE decrease their utilities costs, then everyone else all the other ratepayers has to compensate. But I think GPA needs to work within their own appropriational structure that they have and start being more conscious of how they're.
We are,
setting
one of the things
aside
I think
those,
that we'll learn, yeah, one of the things I think we'll learn a lot about, all of us, is JFK. I think through the refinancing
Right.
that, you helped move last year, the part of that was to fund solar panels. And so
Right.
they put it in, and we're gonna be tracking those utility costs and see how that goes. And that may give us the next.
Also have the authority to work contracts out for solar panels in the future. So that's also something that you can move on your end now. Okay, and then the who are the POCs? Are those the same individuals that we met at USDOE when we went together to Washington?
So now actually, this is so one of the challenges. It's the changing cast of characters. So we met with the prior administration. So this year there are a bunch of new players, and that's why it was very important to try to connect with various ones. So there are different. I mean, Mark Robinson and Christine Jackson are still in risk
They're still
management,
there? Okay,
still working on Guam, but they do have a new person in charge. And a new, I guess at a deputy level, a new person in charge there. So it's just always helpful for us to make that argument at every level for continued progress. And we definitely know that, even in DC, they're not fully back to work at their headquarters, a lot of remote work. So we were concerned that they wouldn't improve travel for their employees to come out to Guam. But I think we are going to get them out here, in the next few months.
okay, so they are coming over. It's not a
Yeah,
a virtual
date.
visit.
Yeah, they'll be coming probably in the April to May timeframe. And this is, of course, in advance of every year they issue a letter that gets drafted in June and issued by July that, it really has to go along with the grants that they issue in July 1st. And that's when they issue the special conditions letter. So it's always important to try to get them to change that letter and change those requirements prior to that July 1st date. So April or May is the timeframe, and we'll let you know. Well, of course, I'm sure they'll want to meet with everybody when they do come in.
Okay, and then I have another request. I know that you have budget meetings with the board and with your staff. If we would be welcomed to send a representative down there or myself to listen in, I know we don't have any decision on the matter, but at least to listen in and observe the challenges that you are having financially with whatever it is that you have to do financially. I mean, that would be a good help for us to be able to close these gaps that you listed in this memorandum and to understand our way forward. If we could-
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we definitely welcome that.
Okay, so can you please keep the committee abreast when you have these meetings so that we can just be observers?
Right. The time frame of, as you know, is going to be heavy in December, and then January will be heavy with budget meetings.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm asking now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, we appreciate that. Thank you so much, because I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can for GDOE, and it's frustrating to see that, perhaps we're not meeting you in what you feel is appropriate. But I think that there are some clarifications that need to be discussed as well. And I look forward to that dialogue and also to understand the movement of the different types of grant money that you have coming in, or the different types of federal funds that you have coming in that are in competition with our current appropriation for GDOE. So
Okay.
I appreciate that. If you could send us a notice when you're meeting. I know
Will do.
perhaps sometimes you just meet with your deputies. We would like to be a part of that also, understanding the finances and being able to hear some of your challenges. And then so we don't hopefully get next year another memo saying that we need to pay an X amount of dollars to GDOE.
Yeah, no, Senator, I apologize if it was reviewed that way. I mean, in the course of trying to get through the fiscal year, and of course working with our board and working with you and the governor, actually a lot gets borne by the department in trying to make ends meet. And we're happy to share that with you and come up with solutions. I think this year it was really just to kind of highlight it, make sure the board understood. And I wasn't really concerned with this year in the sense that we do have federal funds available. But what this means is that if we carry this into next year, and like you said, you're looking once these federal funds are committed to a project, they no longer have, they may not be available as well. So we will have to confront it, but hopefully it's kind of looking forward, finding a solution and, coming to agreement on how best to address, the needs. So we'll definitely welcome you into those meetings, you and your staff, and we'll send out once we get our schedule down, we'll send that to you as well.
We appreciate that. Thank you so very much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
with that being said, I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. Thank you for being present today and a Happy New Year. And it is now 11:42 and we will adjourn this oversight hearing. Thank you very much for being here and for sharing some of the challenges that you're having. And we look forward to working closely with you to explore the solutions that we may capture. So thank you very much.
All right, Merry Christmas, Senator.
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas, everyone.
God bless you guys.
Same to you.
Bye-bye.